Speeding. Huh. It's like we never left. Zeiss Batis versus G Master. That is the question. And what did I decide? I decided on G Master across the board. And now I kind of regret it. Now, my regret is not exactly like losing a long lost love. My reasons for choosing G Master some years ago when I started my filmmaking business were good reasons. At the time, I was doing a ton of event work, weddings, concerts, things like that, and I loved having the manual controls on the side of the lenses, aperture, declicker, but more importantly, autofocus. I liked being able to switch between the autofocus and the manual focus right on the lens. Yes, before you interrupt me, you can do that on the camera, I know, but I never did. And I just liked having the functionality and the way that I hold the camera when doing handheld type shots. It just made a whole lot more sense for me to shoot with the G Master lenses the way they were. So I switched out my 85 and my 25 for the 24 and the 85 G Masters. And I kind of wish that I hadn't, but I'm also glad that I did. And if you've gotten this far in the episode and you are done with me, I'll just give the spoiler. Batis is better. When it comes to picture, when it comes to just sheer picture, whether it's photography or video, I like the image of the Batis lenses better. That's not to say that the G Masters aren't great. They absolutely are, in particular the ones that I have. The 24 1.4 is a brilliant lens. They all are. But the image is very clean and it's very neutral. It's not clinical. Don't let anyone tell you that it's clinical like a surgical sort of, camera for your prostate. It's very, very, very clean, but it's also somewhat neutral, which is what I wanted at the time. Shooting things where I had to manipulate white balance or whatever it may be in post, it was nice having just a nice, clean, neutral image. Aperture was also a huge focus for me at the time. Like many newbies, I was enamored with the ability to go as wide open as possible. And so the 1.4 of most of the lenses and the 1.8 of the 135 just really appealed to me in that stage of my life. Whereas the Batis lenses were more in the 2 to 2.8 range. So that was a huge priority for me at the time. And nowadays I do less and less photography. Portraiture photography for sure is really not something I do much anymore. And as I moved into more narrative commercials, I needed to be a little bit less wide open and focus on seeing a little bit more of the background. So as I learned and as I grew, I noticed that aperture in terms of getting that real mushy background just wasn't a huge priority. So as that became less of a priority and just a sheer preference for picture became the thing that I really focused on, that's when I started to edge back just a little bit towards the Batis series of lenses. But as my business shifted more and more from the events and more into more documentary style, talking head films, short films, promos, and now I'm working on a feature, the autofocus is so good on the modern Sony cameras that the Zeiss lenses are pretty much flawless when it comes to the autofocus, but also I love how they look on Sony cameras. Currently, my only Batis lens is the 18mm 2.8. I use it on my FX30. Sometimes when I want something that's in that 28 to 30 something looking range in terms of focal length, but then I'll also use it on my A7S III for something wide, and I haven't used it in real estate just yet, but I love how little to no distortion really there is on the lens when you're using it on the FX30 up close, and it pairs beautifully with the Zeiss, the Sony Zeiss 1.4, one of their first lenses that Sony did with Zeiss, which I'm shooting on right now on the FX30. Beautiful lens, pairs amazingly with the Batis 18mm, and I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh yeah. So ultimately, yeah, it comes down to picture that Zeiss look, the beautiful contrast, sort of the way that these lenses render photo is just absolutely gorgeous. It certainly takes a discerning eye to see the difference between the Batis and the G Masters, but when you do compare them side by side, which I have done now by kind of looking back at some of the old videos that I did and some of the comparison photos, it's very clear. And even back then, you know, all the internet really didn't like me for choosing the G Masters, but you know, it was functionality at that point in time. Still absolutely hate the focus ring, but I don't really use it anymore because I'm doing everything with autofocus, and don't ever use the OLED screen. It's a cool feature, but obviously it's useless pretty much. Now Zeiss has discontinued, I think, all of their photo lenses, focusing just on cinema lenses. So anything that could be considered a photo lens or something that it, you know, go on mirrorless type of prosumer type cameras, they don't make anymore. And the Batis, I think the last one released or announced was the 40mm in like 2018. That was the last Batis lens that they announced. So it's been a very long time since a new one was released. Another new one will never be released. I would presume that this is it. So pricing wise, I think brand new, they're just a little bit more expensive than maybe they were in 2018, but used, you can get them for fantastic price. I think that the 18mm I got for under 400 bucks on Adorama. So, or maybe it was eBay. Either way, great price for a beautiful lens. Now, that's not to say that the G Masters aren't great. They're brilliant lenses, and they have done so much for me and my career, and I love them very much. But now that it's come down to just picture and non-functionality, I am going to, part with my 24, 85, and 135 G Masters and replace them with the Batis lenses. And I'm really excited to kind of shift back into that I loved before. Another thing to consider if you are someone who shoots sort of handheld type of work, the Batis lenses are so light. They're significantly lighter, I think, than the G Master lenses. And it makes sense why, but that is something to take into consideration. So yes, ultimately, functionality is important. Depending on what you're doing with the lenses, there's a lot to consider when purchasing a lens. Now, I have no input whatsoever on Tamron or Sigma. I used Sigma for a minute there between when I was doing the GH5, I think it was, and they're fine. They do great lenses. I'm sure now, especially, they make beautiful lenses. But at the time when I first had some Sigmas on my first A7 III, they were not at all up to par in terms of autofocus. I thought that they edged a little on that clinical side. I did try some Rokinons at a period of time, and none of those lenses appealed to me. What appealed to me was the G Master versus the Batis, and so that's what I can speak to. And so if it comes down to those two lenses and picture is the main thing, your main focus, then these lenses are absolutely the way to go. But I'm not going to dissuade you from G Masters. They're gorgeous, and you can buy mine if you'd like. And all that said, thank you so much for stopping by. I know it's been a long time. I had a couple of different YouTube interests. I had started a cocktail and cigars channel. I had started a bit of like a more pop culture film reviewing channel. And now I'm just going to shift everything right back to here. We still will be filmmaking and film focused, but I would like to start bringing in some of the elements of movie reviews and things that are a little bit more, nerdy talking. On the other channel, I spoke a lot about the Penguin show, which I really loved, but so much of the reason why I loved it was the art of it. And so I think it was something that was a little bit more appropriate for a channel like this. So even though I had mentioned some time ago that I was going to focus on another endeavor, in the YouTube space. I think I'm going to just coalesce everything here, and we'll just do all the things here. We'll have cigars. We'll talk about movies. We'll talk about filmmaking, and we'll discuss kind of what it is that that makes this whole filmmaking world so wonderful and so great. But I'll make another, I'm sure, episode about that at some point in time. But regardless, thank you so much for stopping by. If you do decide to buy any of these lenses, I do have links down below, the affiliate links, which obviously help me out a ton. But with that, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.